What is up, Unity community? Welcome on back to another official Unity live stream. We, of course, are live here on twitch.tv/Unity as well as on the official Unity YouTube page. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are here watching live, again, this is a conversation. Make sure to hop in chat. Let us know where in the world you are tuning in from. We have a very special show planned for you all. We're trying something new and exciting, so we want to hear from you. If you have questions, comments, concerns, don't know why you would, please let us know throughout the show. However, if you are watching this as a VOD, check out that bottom navigation bar as we will have chaptered off the information so you can hop to the parts that most apply to you. I said we're trying something new. Let's dive into a little bit about what that's about here and give you guys a little bit of expectation setting. So we, inside the Unity team, kind of mulled over a format here, an iterative format. How can we present information or approaches to game dev that would require different layering? So what we came up with was this concept that we are tentatively calling crunch time, where we provide something that needs to be built and we adjust the amount of time given to see how that would change the approach to creation. So for this first one, we are bringing in a wonderful guest, Mike Geig. You might know him. And we asked him to make us a 2D player controller. I say we asked him to. He volunteered. You know what I mean? He did volunteer. But we're going to go through and see how that approach changes if we gave Mike 10 minutes, if we gave Mike an hour, or if we gave Mike a full day to go through these processes. Mike's going to open up the projects, show you the different approaches, and hopefully you guys can take away different approaches to the same task, the same problem, the same tool, and when you might be using those things. But it's great to have you all here again. Thank you so much for joining live. My name is Jackson. I'm one of your community managers here at Unity. I'm responsible for all of the live stream content. Love to have you guys here watching live. Love to have you watching the VODs. You being here means that we can continue to create this very awesome content. And I want to give you content that you connect with, that you resonate with things that you want to learn. So I have dropped a link to a survey in the chat. If you want to hop in there, it's only 4 questions, takes maybe 3 minutes, should give us an idea a little bit more about who you are and what type of content you want to see. So again, I want to say hey to some people and shout out some names. Of course, we've got C. Stratton, Bob Lee. We've got Mike Geig in the chat as well. We've got The Bull, welcome on in. Lake Monster Games, Grayman, Lanata. We got DC Wilson. Suddenly Nolan is here. Everybody, thank you so much for being here for the top of this stream. We are live every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. GMT, so come and check us out. We are also doing more streams, so we'll be live on Tuesdays as well. If you want to keep up to date with the schedule for these live streams and everything that we're bringing you, check out the Discord where we will have the events on the left side of the screen. And on the YouTube page, we have our live stream schedule as it comes to fruition. So it's great to have you all here again, checking where you guys are coming in from all over the world. It's absolutely incredible. Dev Dave asks, Unity TikTok when? It's actually something we've talked about. There might be an opportunity for us to kind of throw little tool tips and stuff. No promises, but just so you know, we talk about these things too. VG Junkie asking if I shaved. I did. I went to an event. I went to the Canadian Video Game Awards this past weekend, so I wanted to look my best. But enough about me. It's great to see you all here. Thank you so very much one more time. And without further ado, I think it's time that we bring in our guest here. You know him. You love him. He hired me, so I owe him my life. Everyone say hey to Mike Geig. Welcome on in. How's that for an intro, Mike?
I liked it.
How's it going?
There. It's good. Things are good. Actually, it's funny. You asked earlier about questions, comments, and you said concerns. And I feel like I have a concern I need to throw out there.
You want to air a grievance to start?
I feel like Jackson without the beard is a little less trustworthy.
A little less trustworthy.
It's like you got Spock, and then evil Spock has the goatee. And I feel like in your world, because everyone does everything is different backwards in Canada. Canada, not having the beard just feels a little shady. I'm just gonna throw that one out there.
I get that. Also, someone pointed out to me, they were like, "Hey, you shaved your beard to go to the Canadian Game Awards. If there was anywhere that would have been acceptable for you to look like a lumberjack, it would have been that event. And I
Right?
went, yeah, that's a good point.
Something's just not adding up there. It's not adding up.
There's something.
Things are good. Things are good. I'm glad to be here. Yes, it was willing. I saw someone's like willingly. Yes, willingly being here for this one. So thank you for having me on the show again.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you essentially created this live stream platform back when it had its inception initially, catered to it and molded it to your will and your vision. And then, you know, you're a busy dude with a lot going on and you've taken a step away. And it's, how does it feel to kind of come back and return to it?
Oh, it's always great. I don't know if for anyone who was here back then, that was like, you know, 11, 12 years ago. Everything was like stick figure art in MS Paint. It was very different than it is now. Maybe one of these days we should just have a live stream of going back and looking at all the stick figure drawings we used to do on the channel. But no, I always love coming back and being on the channel here and just seeing all the really cool stuff that's going on. The wealth and variety of content is just so cool. So yeah. Always glad to be here with challenges. And this one, I'll be honest, was stressful.
So let's dive into what crunch time actually is. And tentative title, because we talked about it. Crunch time, I think, communicates exactly what the concept is, but I also don't want to glorify something that is problematic within the games industry. So we'll ruminate on it. If anyone has any other suggestions, let us know. We put in a lot of time just trying to figure out the title of this.
I like Time Crisis, but then we didn't want to get sued by the Time Crisis game.
We did go to our proxy lawyer and we're like, hey, do you think we would get sued? They're not a lawyer, but we were like, you have lawyer tendencies.
You seem responsible.
Yeah, you seem like you've got your stuff together. Would Time Crisis get us sued? And then we had different, like, just what if we spelled time differently? And we're playing with spices now. So Crunch Time kind of came together from a collaboration and brainstorm session within our team. So shout out to like Neil and Aaron and like Alana was a part of that. Kirk was a part of that initial concept where we said like, hey, we want to do something iterative. We want to show how an approach would change based on something. And we eventually came around to the time. How would it change if you had more or less time? And I think that there's going to be a level of applicability here because sometimes people don't have all of the time that they need. It is a reality in game dev that like every little thing can't just take forever. We have people that are doing game jams and we've done those live on stream. So maybe something would be more polished and thorough if you had a full day to do it, but maybe you do need to get it done in 10 minutes. So that was kind of the concept as it came about. And then we came to you and you said, hey, what if we did a 2D player controller? Why did you pick this topic for the first show?
It felt like low-hanging fruit. Like, oh, I can knock this. I got this. It wasn't until I started doing it under time constraint that I'm like, I don't remember how to do any of this stuff. And it just kind of just straight out your brain there. No, and I was playing Nine Souls. I know we've talked about this. I was playing Nine Souls and I was like, oh yeah, 2D. I want to build a really cool responsive 2D character controller. And so that was like, yes, that feels like a really good topic there. And it was, and I have some new stuff to show and some, you know, little twists and turns, but wasn't nearly as easy as I thought it was going to be once I start putting a ticking clock in front of me. So yeah.
Stressful, I imagine, but we also will be sharing out a lot of the resources, so keep an eye in the chat for those links, and then if you're watching the VOD, I will put all of them into the description after the fact as well. We have a couple of good names that have come through. Timebox, we also have a pun from C. Stratton, Clocked and Loaded, which I think is pretty legit, actually. That's really legit.
Love a good pun.
I like that a lot, actually. Clocked and Loaded
Clocked and Loaded.
That's pretty solid. We might take that down. I'm gonna write that down somewhere. Polish Levels is a good name. Mr. Awesome. The Bull says the pressure cooker, which is cool as well. Yeah.
Funny story about Polish Levels. So this is true. It's ages ago. I wrote an article and one of the section titles was like polish and deployment or something like that. And the editor like flagged it and was like, I just don't understand. And we got this whole argument about it. Turns out they thought I was saying Polish and deployment, like Poland.
Oh,
And I'm like, Polish. Like, in what world would this chapter or this section be Polish in deployment?
There was a moment where I was messaging with you and I was like, and we have to, and I wanted to type out like, and we have to speak Polish the whole time. But I was like, we've just been talking about Polish for so long, the joke wouldn't land. So I stepped away from it. We do have a kind of question, Robert K asking, what about best practices, most efficient in terms of processing speed? We'll kind of be talking about, especially towards the end, we'll be circling back to be like, Mike, what would you have done differently? What would you like to have accomplished? How would you go about doing that? So we'll go through the very real, what actually happened. And then we'll also discuss if you were given more time, if you had more resources with the knowledge that you learned throughout this, how would that change your approach? So I think there will be something for everyone to take away from this. Mike, you very quickly were like, let's make sure people know this is what not to do, or like we'll definitely kind of communicate, hey, this is what needed to happen here, but it's held together with bubblegum and dreams. Don't do it. So
I think someone was like, hey, someone mentioned like downloading the project. I'm like, you don't want this project.
You don't want that.
I'll show you stuff, but this code is bad. And
we'll tell you why.
It took all of my effort to not like cheat and go back in and just clean it all up. And I'm like, make it a good representation of myself, but nope. No, you're going to see it in all its glory.
Sorry, I got distracted by someone saying the Polish joke was finished. Finland, got it. It's good puns. You guys are good puns, and this is the kind of creativity that we need in this community. So keep it up, everybody.
This is what sets the game industry apart. You think automotive is cracking puns like this? No, not happening.
I was talking to our producer before we went live, and so when are you putting out your game? And I was like, oh, you don't want that. It's not going to happen. And then I was like, but I do have an idea, and it's just a game. I was like, what if I took this pun and made a game off of it? And like, I don't think that's an appropriate approach to game creation, but here we are.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
maybe that's what sells it in the end.
Just takes one idea.
That's it. Also, I can't get over clocked and loaded. I think that's fantastic. We might be using
that's resonating. That's resonating well
for that one.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, I think it's time that we dive into this. We've got a little over an hour to kind of get through quite a bit of content here. So I think we should start in on the 10-minute 2D player controller. Now, if you saw the thumbnail to this, you might be thinking, whoa, dang, you're going to teach me how to do that? We are, but we're also going to teach you maybe why not to do that. So, Mike, we tasked you with 10 minutes on the clock. I didn't stand over your shoulder with a stopwatch, so I assume that you're a trustworthy kind of guy, that you stuck to this.
You can trust that I stuck to 10 minutes because if I hadn't, it would be better.
Okay, that's good. That's very, very
10
good.
minutes is not as much time as you think it's going to be. So, yeah, I thought, I had my list here of the things I was going to have in here in 10 minutes, and then I just have red X's next to so much of this.
Yeah. So the way that I think, kind of structured this is we're going to go through what goals you set for that time period and then show off what you were able to accomplish and what you were not. So with a 10-minute timer, what was your kind of initial series of goals and checklist here?
Yeah. And I want to preface too, before joining Unity, I did a lot of gameplay prototype programming. And so this was like sort of like this is like coming home, right? And usually I like to start with just what's the bare requirements of a prototype. What are the stretch goals of a prototype? Because prototypes, they're meant to be fast. They're meant to be throwaway. I didn't want to put a lot of time nitpicking details because, this isn't the sort of thing that you keep around. It's a thing that proves a concept. Is it fun? Is it whatever before you go into long-term development with it? And so I have my initial set of goals, then I have my stretch goals, and I have like the kind of general idea. So for 10 minutes, I needed to make sure that it could collide with things, right? That's pretty standard. That I wanted to have horizontal movement, and I wanted to be able to jump. And then for my stretch goals, I wanted to have alternate levels of jumping, like you hold the space bar, you jump higher than if you just tap it. And I wanted to include a double jump, and I wanted to include a sprint. Because sprint is just moving faster. How hard can that possibly be?
I think I know the answer in the end here, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. So those were my goals. I also want to point out that each of these character controllers is split into 2 phases. So the first phase is I'm just building the character controller. And then phase 2, once the clock is stopped, I add cosmetics to it. Cosmetics just make it feel more responsive, make it feel more snappy, but I didn't add any new functionality, right? So I was like, okay, with what I built, now what can I tweak and change and whatever? This purely cosmetic. Or if I expose the variable, I can adjust the variable in the editor or whatever. That's more of a design task anyway. So there's like the 10-minute controller, and then there's 10-minute cosmetic controller, and everything that I added after my 10 minutes ended, I have in comments, like I added this after the clock, cool. Just to give it some visual appeal. And actually the very first step, even approaching this, was the challenge of like, what kind of 2D character controller is this, right? Is it top down, isometric, side scroller? Like, can you control yourself in the air? Is it like fast twitchy gameplay? Is it more cinematic and slow experience, more intentional? There were a lot of things to consider because 2D character controllers, I mean, that's a very vague term. And like I said, I was playing 9 Souls. And so I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to build. But there were a lot of like things to consider when even beginning to think about this. And so before I even started with the 10-minute character controller, what I did is I built a playground. I built a few different things. I built some jumps of various
testing
heights.
Grounds, right?
Exactly. I built like a little tunnel here with some gaps for when I would like sprint or dash, some walls that I could cling to. I have this area down here. This slope is 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 55 degrees. I had an area for, I thought at some point I was going to get crouching in. Yeah. So area for like crouching and stuff like that. So I wanted just to be able to like verify, okay, does this work? So I built myself like a little jungle gym. These assets, by the way, are from the 2D template. So if you just open up the hub and you create a new project and you look down there, there's the 2D sample, and that's where these assets come from. I got rid of the character controller that was in there and all that code and all that stuff, just kept the level assets to build the playground here. So there's that. And so this is my 10-minute character controller. So again, I needed to have collision. So the way I've structured this is there's just the top level object, and then I put the cosmetics underneath because they're just cosmetics. The whole point of prototyping is the functionality and the cosmetics, how it looks, unless you're prototyping a look, right? Keep them separate, because then you could just get rid of the square and replace it with art. So I have this square, purely cosmetic, underneath there. And then on the character controller, I have a capsule collider, and I do a capsule collider because one, I'm using tiles, and generally it's a good idea. If you have any collider in 2D that's perfectly flat, like a box, so, square, then that corner is going to hit. It's like pushing a box on the floor, and every time there's like a crack or a fold or anything, you get stuck and you have to like lift it up over, right? Cool. So something with a rounded bottom means it'll just glide over top of any inconsistencies, little bumps, cracks, things like that. So I just created a character controller. I also wanted it to be approximately, don't move that. I wanted it to be approximately 2 units, or, I went with 1.8 meters high, or units high, which is approximately a meter when we're dealing with physics. So I was like, that's an average height for a person. So I'm like, cool. I don't want it quite 2 blocks tall. I don't want it a meter wide, but I went with 1.8. I kind of try to keep like humanoid dimensions just because it felt better. Right. Though again, it's all about your game, right? Most of this is about the type of game you're creating.
Yeah.
And honestly, as I was developing this, the thing I realized is there were a lot of decisions I couldn't make until I knew what was in my game. Like, how high do I jump? I don't know. How tall, or like who's the level designer? What are the things that you can do depending on what are the mechanics of the game? So I made some just random decisions that felt good, but without having game mechanics and a level design and stuff like that, they're just choices. They may be good, they may be bad, whatever. But I've got this capsule collider. It's got a rigid body on it that is simulated. And then, this script here, I called it, hey, look at me, or hey, camera, look at me. That's on all of my prefabs, just so the camera just knows to look at that thing. So I'm not like dragging the target on every time. It just says, hey, camera, I'm the target. So we don't even need to open that one. But the 10-minute controller script, let me open this up here in all of its glory. So 10-minute controller. So we've got speed, how fast do we move? We've got jump force, the force applied when we jump, a rigid body, which we grab here in the start method. And then if I do input.get button down jump, which I'm using input manager, I'm not using input system, just because I was going fast and I just knew this off the top of my head, that by default spacebar maps to jump in the older input manager input system. So I was like, cool, I don't have time to try to do anything new or interesting in that regard. So just when I press the space bar, I'm just going to add force on the Y axis to my rigid body. And this is new, actually. I hadn't seen this in a while. Used to be like rigid body to add force, and you would have to do X and Y together. And you normally do 0 for X and whatever for Y, but they've added some new helper methods here. So that only adds the Y, which is nice. So the amount of force and then impulse. Yep. Someone asked in chat about wall jump. We'll get there. We get there. And then this is an update, right? Because I want to be able to catch the spacebar right when I press it. So I did that here inside update, even though physics really should be done inside fixed update, right? But again, I had to move fast. So if I put this whole block of code down here in fixed update, you'd find that you'd hit space and you wouldn't jump because you were missing it. And so up here is where I jump, and then here inside fixed update is where I do input.get axis horizontal. That's your left and right, or your A and D on your keyboard. So I'm like, hey, are we going left or right? Multiply it by speed, and then that's our velocity. And then I just do rigid body dot linear velocity. I'm just setting the velocity directly with the velocity. So the X velocity and then the Y velocity is just what it already is. And simple. It works. I'll go ahead and hit play here, and we're already going to start seeing the beginnings of some of the challenges here. So a few things are happening. First and foremost, I'm going to close the stats window there. So I can move. Look at that. So just using my physics there, and I could jump. So success. I did not have a chance to get like variable jump height in. It's just one jump height. Kind of got double jump to work because I can just keep pressing the space bar, and
not what I expected.
Right. Hey, but I mean, that's kind of working. And then we just fall down. Yay. I jumped really high here.
You went really high.
There we go. Yeah. Though this isn't without its problems. Like obviously the infinite jump doesn't make, a platforming game very difficult. But also I stick to walls, which is not great. I only stick to walls if I'm pushing into the wall because I'm setting my velocity. And this is very realistic. If you are being pushed into a wall, and by default, Unity's colliders have some amount of friction, the friction's just binding them together. Like those roller coasters where you would like lean up against the thing that's spinning and then the floor would drop out and you'd stay stuck to the wall, right? Same concept. Friction is holding it in place. So I can jump really high, but I stick to walls. I'm kind of slow and sluggish. My fall is physically accurate. Gravity by default is 9.81, like Earth's gravity at sea level. So it's like cool, but that doesn't feel very good. Doesn't feel very snappy. And so obviously those are some things that we want to solve. The other thing that's kind of important to note that begins right now is that I'm moving by setting velocity. I'm jumping by adding force. That's two ways of doing something I like to do in like polished, final, ways of doing things. Picking one way to move something and sticking with it. And in this case, you'll see even by the end here, I've got like 3 or 4 different ways of doing something, and that it's very prototypey, which again is why I'm like, don't use my code and just you can learn from it, but it's not good code.
Do as we say, not as we do.
Exactly. I am great at making terrible stuff. Like I feel like that's my specialty, is making stuff that's not good. I can do that all day long. So that's the 2D character controller. And if I delete this here and just bring in my 10-minute character controller with cosmetics, right?
Nice.
So now we've got, so all I did is I just turned off the square and I added cosmetics. I added these art assets, but this part is pretty much exactly the same. And before I dig into kind of what's different about the cosmetics here, I need to do a plug. Where's my plug at here? Here's my plug. So these art assets, the character comes from here. Pixel prototype player sprites. I will tell you, I was looking and I was like, this is $5 and it has like so many animations. It had everything.
Oh, whoa.
I know. I'm like, holy crap. There's like attack animations. There's front climbing, side climbing. There's crouching with guns. There's like, I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. And it's just all these sprites for prototyping and stuff. So I'm like, bam, using that one. So this is my official endorsement of this one because it was like great. I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to find a few different things, or how am I gonna find one that's got all these things that I want to do? And then this one had so much stuff. It even has bow and arrows and stuff. I'm like, we're good. Kicks, martial arts, ground smashes, like it's crazy.
I put the link for this in the chat as well if you guys want to check it out. Also, I love the review is after 7 years of game dev, finally bought an asset. So if you want to break the seal, this might be the one for you, the same way it was for Gamer T Vismit. So you could be just like them.
Absolutely. You know, I actually feel like C-Stron's the guy that, or C-Strucken. I actually don't, I've always just said your name in my head as C-Stron for years. I actually don't know how to say your name. It is like C-Strucken. He's the one that came up with the Clocked and Loaded, right?
Clocked and Loaded, C-Stron.
Okay. If you don't have this asset, just email me. I'm Mike at Unity, and I'll buy this one for you for coming up with a name.
Could we send C-Stron a t-shirt? I don't have any, but if we can find some.
Yeah, we can send him some swag.
Ooh, C-Stron with a t-shirt.
Yeah. I don't know that I have a t-shirt. I've got other stuff. We'll find some stuff.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out. Anyway.
Clocked and Loaded.
I like that name.
It's so good. It took 2 seconds. We were like, hey, what if you guys had a name? Boom. It's in the chat. I was like, whoa. Okay.
That's the community for you.
It's the good stuff.
Awesome stuff. All right. So anyway, there's my plug for these graphical assets. And so what I have on here is just the sprite, right? It's approximately the same size. You can see fits within the capsule collider there. I have a very rudimentary animator controller, which if I open this up here, I can see that I've got 3 states. Idle is just an idle animation. So when that's playing, they're standing still. Run, right? Obviously they're moving. And jump, all pretty straightforward. And I just have some basic parameters. I can basically, speed tells me if I'm idle, if I'm running. And then jump is a trigger. I press that space bar, it goes into the jump animation. And when it's done playing the animation, it just comes either back to run or idle. Some real challenges here. Like it doesn't know when it's on the ground, right? So the animation is not going to look good, right? Because it's got to finish playing while it's still in the air, or keep playing while it's on the ground, all of these things, but it's a start. And I'll show you this, and then we'll look in the code to see how it's just rigged up here. Yeah. And so you can see here a couple things, like it still moves the same as it did, but you see that slide that it kind of has there?
Yeah.
That's a problem to fix in our next iteration. So at this point, what I did is I kind of sat here and went, all right, I can only tweak it so much because I can't change my code except for the cosmetic plugs for the animation, but I can't change my code. So I only can change what I've exposed in the inspector here. And what I've exposed is speed and jump force. And so I'll, took a bunch of notes of things I wanted to fix. So I have that weird little animation there. Jump kind of looks like that.
I like that he kind of hits like a Spider-Man pose in the sky. Yeah.
Yeah. So that works out there. Yeah, so that part works, but I still obviously stick to the walls and kind of do that whole thing when the jump animation's over. So,
it looks good.
Not bad for 10 minutes.
Yeah. How did you feel? Like, were you like crushed it, or were you like, oh no?
I was like, I should have had more done, honestly. But I burnt so much of my time like creating the collider and just tweaking its size. And like, the one is wider, narrower, taller. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, what am I doing? I'm burning time. So, I took for granted that it would just already be sized correctly. And then I'll open up the code here so you can see, obviously commented after the timer. I had to reference the anim, the sprite renderer, and direction. So this is interesting too, because now we're dealing with sprites. I don't have to double all of my sprites have left versions and right versions, right? I just want to be able to turn left and right. And I accomplish that on the cosmetic layer by using this flip X and Y. You can see it's not flipped. It is flipped. Not flipped. It is flipped. It's just cosmetic. The way he's looking is not real. That's just their sprites, right? The actual character controller, it's just this capsule collider. It has no left or right. It doesn't understand any of that. That's just cosmetic. Yep. So inside here, I've got, the animator. The direction is just an integer. 1 is it's facing to the right. I believe -1 is facing to the left. I did this as an integer instead of a Boolean because then I could just use it for math. So then I have that rigid body like normal. I grab the animator, I grab the sprite renderer and the children game object there. And if I press jump, again, added after the timer, the set trigger jump, right? That's easy enough. And then down here in fixed update, after we move, I say, hey, is our horizontal direction. So input.getAccess will return, between -1 and +1. So if it's -1 and my direction is +1 and you multiply them together, you get -1, right? It means they don't match. If they're +1 and +1, you get 1. If they're -1, they're -1, you get 1. So basically you'll only ever get -1 if they don't match. So I just multiply the two by each other. And if it's less than 0, meaning it's a negative number, then I'm not facing the right direction. So cool. And then I set the speed of the animator, right? So it knows what animation to be playing. And down here, I just flip the bit, not really, but multiply by -1 of direction. And then I choose whether the sprite is flipped or not, right? So there we go. So
very nice.
That's it. Yeah. For the
10 minutes, crushed it. We've seen the chat lighting up with what they think they could have accomplished in 10 minutes. And I'd like to hear, what would you guys realistically feel like you could have accomplished in 10 minutes here? People calling out, I would have settled in and gotten comfortable, VG Junkie. I would have been lucky to have made coffee.
No soda, yeah.
I'd have loaded and in packages installed in 10 minutes from C-Strong. First 10 minutes is just making tea. So this was a very short amount of time. I feel like you accomplished a lot. I also want to shout out Aaron, Bradston, and Alana, who have all popped into chat, all Unity reps. Nice. So thank you again for hanging out, showing some support. And I know Aaron and Alana both contributed to the initial brainstorm of this as well. So
it was actually Aaron's idea, right?
It was Aaron's idea.
The one who brought this. So
yeah, absolutely.
Aaron Sharp, quite the go-getter. You can say he's quite sharp.
Whoa.
That's what I hear.
Crushed
around the office.
Yeah. So that was 10 minutes. Again, we did see someone asking, are we going to release the code for this? And the reason is the answer is no. And the reason is because Mike would suggest you don't do this.
I mean, it's not a lot of code. You can absolutely just go back and rewatch the video and type it out in no time at all. I mean, we could potentially, but it's not good code. That's the whole point, right? Prototype code is not generally good code. It's much more important to understand the concepts. And even in 10 minutes, there aren't really great concepts in here. In the next section, we're going to get to some better concepts, but it's better to write good code with a plan from the beginning, as opposed to panicked, oh my God, I'm looking at the timer code, which is what a lot of the stuff is. So yeah.
So that's our 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
As we kind of opened up and released that time stress on you a little bit and gave you 1 hour. How did your approach change? You took basically the 10-minute model as like a basis and then built off of that, correct?
That is correct. So cool. After playing around with the cosmetic one, so I came up with a new plan. Oh, by the way, and I forgot to mention this because this is important. Don't rename that. No. In the 10-minute cosmetic one of the other things I did is I increased the gravity by 5 times. So it's no longer that like lofty, slow, lazy Earth gravity. Now it's about 50 meters per second squared as opposed to 9.81.
Feels more gamey.
So it's snappy, right?
Yeah.
More or less. And there's so much that can be said for this. It's actually a much better idea to have a different gravity on the jump versus the fall. and actually to almost remove gravity for the few seconds of the apex to make it feel like you've got some float, especially if it's a game where you're like fighting and you have to like swing downward, like Ori or Hollow Knight or Nine Souls, where swinging your sword down at enemies while you're jumping over them is important. These, you kind of have this slower up loft and then sharp drop, like there's a lot you can do there. For me, 10 minutes, 5 times gravity right across the board. So there we go. So now in the 1 hour, let me delete that one here. Let's bring our 1 hour into play. Back to just the non-cosmetic, we're back to the Q or the square. So what I wanted to do, one, challenge we had before, and we didn't even see it, I didn't even show you, and I'm sorry, is with those slopes. If I ran up the slope and then I turned around the other way, I just ran right off the slope. Actually, let me, for the sake of just you understanding what I'm talking about, just make sure we're not taking anything for granted. Let's just pop back in here with the 10-minute one, and I'll show you what I mean. I didn't even drop down here. So bloop. So with this one, I'm not going fast enough for that right now, but let's increase my speed a bit. Let's say I'm much faster. See that little pop there?
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm leaving the ground. Well, that's a problem. I don't want that to happen. Again, that's just a result of purely physics-driven. Like, it's realistic, but as we all know, realism is rarely fun. Yeah. So realism is not what we're going for. So one, my goal was to stick to the ground, right? So that I can move up and down these slopes without popping off all weird like. And then, I don't want to stick to the walls, right? I want to hit a wall and slide down it. I feel like that's reasonable. I want to limit my double jumps, right? So I can't double jump to infinity. I want to have some way of knowing whether or not I'm on the ground, which is also important because I have to know if I'm on the ground, both for animations and to have better jumps, especially if I want to do a double jump. Your double jump refreshes when you hit the ground. So I have to know, am I on the ground? I wanted to add moving higher the longer I held the jump button. So if I quick tapped it, it was a smaller jump, but if I held it, I jumped much higher. I did not get a chance to get that done. I wanted to make movement more snappy, right? You saw like how I kind of slow and the animation gets weird, and like I let go of the key and I kind of drift to an end. And that's great if my game is more cinematic, if my game is more slow and relaxing. But if I'm like I said, I'm modeling this after like Nine Souls and other games like that, where it's like a snappy, like brawler. I want my character, if I say move, you move. I don't want, I'm skewing realism for speed. So I want to get rid of that, but it's effectively gravity in my input there. I believed when I started making this that I was going to add crouching, and I did not. And then I wanted to extract input out of the character controller for a few different reasons. The first being that I want to just be able to make tweaks to how I'm reading or doing whatever with input, or even what my inputs are, without affecting my character controller. Right. Or finding where in the code I'm looking for inputs. I want to simplify that. I want to extract that all away. And the second is, if my game needs to have bots, right? I don't want to have 2 different character controllers. I just want to have the player's input script and then a bot input script, and treat it like both of them are playing with controllers and the character controller just does what their inputs are telling them to do. Right. So by extracting it out, we have a lot of flexibility with how we evolve our character controllers. Also, spoiler alert, I already had some code that just handled and wrapped up player input for me. And I was like, cool, I just grabbed that. So I did not write this from scratch in 1 hour. I already had that, which is, I guess, maybe a pro tip, life hack when it comes to prototyping: steal everything you can.
Recycle.
Sure.
No, I like that.
Steal it all.
We talk about it all the time, like using the right tool, using where your experience lies. Knowing something is obviously going to be faster than learning something. So wherever you have these resources, cut corners intelligently.
Yeah, absolutely. Evan in chat asked, "Is this live?" Unfortunately, no. We're all pre-recorded. Sorry, Evan. That's a joke. Okay, so let's dig in here. So first and foremost, I've got the square is back. We all love the square, but I'm doing something different here. You'll see that I have two colliders.
Oh,
All
cool.
right, I have the side colliders, right, in the head, and then I have this collider that's just for the feet. You don't have to do it this way, but I set it up this way. One, because I'm just kind of used to it. That way I can have different physical properties on each, because maybe your feet slide and your sides don't, or maybe I want to detect collisions on a collider. And if I'm detecting collisions on the entire collider, I won't know if the ceiling that I'm hitting is the ground with my head or the walls. Is this the ground? I'm just detecting a collision, right? And I have to add some extra logic to detect, what kind of collision and stuff. Where if I just have a foot collider, I can just be like, only check that foot to see if there's collision happening and leave the sides alone. So I have a 2 collider setup here. The other thing I have is on my body caps collider, the tall one here. I've added this physics material called Teflon. I call it Teflon because nothing sticks to it. I have a friction of 0 with a friction combine of medium and a bounciness of 0. So you're just going to glide off of things, which again can lead to some weird physics stuff if you're not handling it appropriately, because then you just like slide on the ground forever and you're like, why am I still sliding? Why haven't I not stopped? So you kind of have to make sure you're working with that in mind. But I am applying some Teflon here. I still have my rigid body. I changed my collision detection to continuous just because I like to. I don't know, because I was noticing a little bumpiness with the tile map collider. And so I thought, all right, we'll just turn that on. And it seemed to fix it. And then I've got my 1 hour character controller. And look at all of these variables.
Whoa.
Look at all this stuff. So,
okay.
Spoiler, I didn't add these. I'll show you. It's actually pretty cool. So what I did here is I have just the character controller. And again, there's my speed, there's my jump force. I have this jump collider disable time, right? Because what I want to have happen is when my character jumps, I don't want them in that frame or the very next frame be like, I'm still on the ground, stop jumping. So I have to kind of disable the collider for a brief moment to get off the ground and then turn it back on while I'm in the air. Spoiler alert, don't do that. That's a terrible way of doing it. You shouldn't just turn colliders on and off, and I fix that problem later. So if you're just tuning in now, you've missed my my warnings that this is not good code, and you think turning off the colliders is the way to solve this. It is not the way to solve this. It is just the way to solve this if you only have an hour to do this. It is
a way to solve this.
Yeah, and it's not a good one.
We've got Ryan on the Twitch chat saying such a horrible way to do a jump collider. Acknowledged. Mike's aware.
Absolutely. Yeah. Every time someone messages me later, like, your code's bad, I'm like, I know.
I told you this.
Duh. Honestly, though, if you turn colliders on and off, the physics system doesn't freak out, but it's like, imagine how you would feel if a solid object just appeared in your world, right? Like, it doesn't know what to do with that first frame. It's back and it's got to refigure out how that relates to everything else. And are things colliding with each other? And it can create things like infinite velocities to try to separate things. And it's just not a good idea. But if you're in a pinch, it's very, very quick. Mr. Awesome, I did notice, asked if I use any AI to help. I did not use any AI to help. The only AI I used is in trying to come up with a name for this stream, because I asked ChatGPT to give me names for this stream in the voice of Werner Herzog, which created all these like wild, wacky, like my favorite is infinite loop, finite reality. That one was so good. But anyway, that's the only AI I used. Yeah. So, and someone else is, wouldn't raycast be better? Yeah, absolutely. Raycast would be great. Though I'm going to show you a thing here that's actually even better that I just learned about. So let's hop into the code. So first and foremost, I'll just show you the player input. And if you're like, man, this is all so well commented and formatted. I wrote this a long time ago. I had it on hand, I stole it. So there you go. But basically, I'm just keeping track of these public methods of like, what's my horizontal? Am I holding the jump? Did I just press the jump? Am I holding crouch even though I'm not using crouch? Did I press crouch? Dash, even though we're not really using dash right now? in updates. The nice thing here is I'm clearing the updates and then I'm processing updates here in the update method, but only in fixed update am I saying, hey, I'm ready to clear my inputs. That way, even though update is capturing my inputs, it's not until fixed update when I read those inputs that I then clear it out. That way I don't have that mismatch of like, I press space, but you missed it because you're only checking for inputs in fixed update. This keeps the inputs around until they have a chance to be used, which was a nice little way of solving that.
Okay,
again, new input system solves a lot of these problems. This is what I had on hand with only an hour to make this. It was actually a goal of mine to like swap all this out before today with the new input system just to show you. And then I didn't have time. I'm sorry. So maybe that'll be a follow-up. And then basically in here, we just process the inputs. And one interesting thing, so if you remember that lofty movement where I kind of slow down instead of just stopping, I can go into the input manager and turn like the gravity of that input off, or in here, instead of input.getAccess, I can do input.getAccess raw. And what that is that's just -1, 0, or 1. None of those values in between. I'm either pressing the button right, pressing it left, or not pressing it at all, with none of those values in between. And it completely removes that like scaling up and scaling down and stuff like that. So that just gives you really snappy movements there. And so that's the input. And now let's go to the controller. So here, like I said, I have the speed, the jump force, the collider disable time, and this one was cool. I didn't know about this one actually. So the contact filter 2D, right? This one was really cool. Also, a rigid body 2D.slide movement. These are just two variables, right? And because these variables are public, here you can see ground filter gives me all of these options, right? That's just built into that variable. I didn't add any of this stuff.
Oh, okay.
So I can say like, hey, this filter, right? Are we going to use triggers? Are we going to use the layer mask to only collide with certain layers? Are we using a depth mask, right? Or depth. So like things that are on a different Z axis may not trigger collisions, even though they have colliders, which was really cool. Are we using these normal angles, which is neat? Like, you ever notice how you need to make sure that you're on the ground when you're standing, obviously on a flat surface, but if you like hit your head, you don't want that to count as the ground, right? Or the wall beside you, you don't want that to count as the ground either, even if your foot collider somehow collides with it. Well, we can actually say, you know what? Look for any normals that are 5 degrees to 175 degrees, ignoring 0 and 180, right? And that's our ground angle that we'll collide with. Anything that's more extreme won't collide, right? And it's actually really cool. So we can say, what is the normals of this collision? The normal being the line that leads directly, from point A to point B through a surface, right? So now we can have very accurate, specific types of collisions, which is really cool. And then also we have this slide movement. So inside here, it's basically an iterative solver that can keep us on the ground, helps us handle slopes. That actually can do a lot of things. And we're going to have some links here at the end where there's like a sample library and stuff like. Actually, Jackson, could we post the 2D sample library link now?
Sure.
Do we have that one handy?
I got it. Sample.
There you go.
It didn't go. I'll work on it.
No, it just said the word sample with an exclamation point.
Yeah, you keep going. I'll get it.
It was like exciting. So in here, we could say like, okay, at what angle do we slide on a surface? I have like 60 degrees here. Or I'm sorry, what angle can we like climb up to? Anything higher than that, we can't climb. It's basically treated like a wall. At what angle do we start slipping? So if anything's steeper than 40 degrees, we start sliding. Less than that, we'll just stay where we are. What's the gravity of this like solver? What's the gravity of these slopes? All this stuff. Anchor's specifically what's going to keep us on the ground. If you notice, when I ran up the slope and then ran the other way and I just jumped off.
Oh yeah.
This will anchor us to the ground unless we're jumping. Right? So it's going to, nope, you're on the ground, which is a nice thing to do. And we can specify like what the ground layer is. I provided a collider in here, but you're going to see in the next iteration, the one day, we're going to change this up a little bit to solve some other problems. But basically, these two variables give us a lot of options. And now we can see, someone said, I'm disappointed you didn't do this in dots. Who says I didn't? But I didn't. Not in this amount of time. I do have a version that is in dots, but not for this. And so if I go into this character controller, so there's our contact filter, our rigid body slide movement variable. These we all saw before, but now I've got this player input variable, which is just that script I showed you before. That's going to have all the players' inputs. And I have a new variable. Are we grounded? Are we on the ground? And have we double jumped? Have we used up our double jump? Yes or no?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that
because you just get one.
No more infinity. No more flying.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
That easy.
Unless, somehow you want the flying, right? Make a Flappy Bird 9 souls. There's your idea.
Whoa. No one take that. That's mine.
That's right. That sounds frustrating. So no longer am I doing anything in update. I can do everything in fixed update, right? Because now my inputs are handled for me in update, and then I just process them here in fixed update. And instead of like raycasting to determine if I'm on the ground, I'm just saying, hey, basically collider of the slide movement, which if you recall here under my slide movement, I specified this ground collider. That's that second collider. I'm saying right there. It's saying, hey, ground collider, right? Are you touching anything? And use this filter to tell me if you are. So it's basically saying, okay, well, ground collider, are we touching anything that is on the ground layer that has a normal angle between 5 degrees and 175 degrees? Yes or no, right? And that comes back either, yes, we're touching something, which means I'm on the ground, or no, we're not. So there we go. Someone said, what kind of monster uses light mode in Visual Studio? I use light mode when I'm recording videos because it makes it easier for some people to see. So that's what I do.
It also means you have to pay attention because your eyeballs won't let you not.
Yeah, it burns your retinas.
Exactly.
Life is pain. So there you go. So if we're on the ground, then I have my double jump again, right? And another thing I did is just for diagnostics, and I didn't even do this. I stole this from Melvin, who's wrote a lot of the stuff for the 2D stuff. We'll talk about him in a little bit. He threw this idea out there, and I was like, oh, I'm going to steal that. So basically, if we're on the ground, we're going to be green. They got to make it really easy to diagnose whether we believe we're on the ground or not. And if we're not on the ground, we're red. Cool. That makes that really easy. That's cosmetic, but still I added this step because I was having like, is it working? Is it working? Am I on the ground? And this just made it very visual. I also broke up my movement and my jump into these two methods. So I want to process the horizontal movement, and then I'm going to process the jump, right? So for process horizontal movement, I'm just grabbing my horizontal axis of my inputs, left, right, A and D, multiplied by my speed. So that's the velocity that I want. And then if I'm on the ground, right, I am creating a slide velocity variable, a vector 2, which is comprised of how fast I want to be going on the x direct axis and how fast I am going on the y axis. And I'm using this method, rigid body 2D dot slide. So no longer am I setting the velocity directly. I'm using the slide method. And the slide method, like I said, is a solver. I'm saying, hey, this is how I want to move. You tell me where I end up, right? You do the thing. And this is interesting because I can let it solve for me and actually move my character, or I could just let it return back the results of the slide. You can see there's a variable here on my screen. If you see that, slide results is a variable type that can be returned back that says, this is what would happen if I tried to do that. And then I can be like, oh, well, with those slide results, let me do something unique. Let me like really tweak or control what would have happened. So slide is just going to solve this for me. It's going to go, well, you would have gone here and been down a little bit further because you're on the slope, or you would have been over there, or you would have hit this wall or whatever. And I go, cool. Now I'm going to do something with that. Obviously, this was an hour long, so I don't do any of that stuff. I just say, move me. So I'm telling it the velocity I want to have. My time frame here is that time.fixed delta time, my physics step, and the slide movement variable up top here with all the different parameters and things like that. And so then if I'm not on the ground, I'm just purely go on velocity, left, right. I'm in the air. It was a choice too. Do you want to be able to move in the air, choose, or do you want to just have a fixed trajectory? And I obviously want to be able to control my movement in the air to make it feel very responsive. So, we're just purely setting velocity. Again, could potentially use slide for that still. I could use forces. Here I'm using velocity. I really should pick one. I will say, again, I mentioned having multiple ways to do things. Slide really works better if my rigid body is kinematic and I'm controlling everything by myself, but I still wanted to use physics for like the jumping and the collision because I didn't have a lot of time to like create all these custom jumping velocities and stuff. So if I was creating a really detailed, really, well crafted 2D controller, I'd consider using a kinematic rigid body and actually using animation curves and all these other things to really be able to tweak my jump velocities and gravities and all that stuff. But I'm just doing this, right? Moving fast. And then there's the same like flip direction. You can see I commented some stuff out here because we'll use that later. Some of the cosmetic stuff from the step before. And in my jump, I'm saying, hey, did I press jump? And either am I on the ground or do I have a double jump available? If I'm on the ground, obviously I can jump. If I'm not on the ground and I don't have a double jump, then obviously I can't jump. So if that is true, then I zero out my current velocity because you don't want to be falling and then double jump and have it just not really move you at all because you had so much negative velocity. So I set it to 0 so I can pop right back up like a true double jump in game mechanic. So I zero out that velocity and I just add the new force to pop you right back up. And then inside here, I'm saying if I am grounded, right? So then I'm going to say, hey, collider, you're not turned on anymore. You're disabled, which is the thing you're not supposed to do. I'll reiterate. I'll cancel any existing invokes for enabling a collider, and then I will enable the collider, invoke that method after a certain period of time, which is just, let's just turn that back on. And I'll say I'm not on the ground. If I'm not grounded in here, then I used my double jump and I no longer have a double jump. No, it's a lot, right? But basically, yeah, biggest things here is that's how I figured out if I'm on the ground. I just do the is touching on the collider, which is pretty cool. Movement is basically using this slide, or unless I'm in the air, in which case I'm using velocity directly. And jump, I'm now just saying I can jump if I'm on the ground or I have a double jump. But if I'm on the ground, I have to turn off that collider so I can leave the ground. Otherwise, I've burnt up my double jump, which I get back the next time I hit the ground. So there we go.
Dang.
I know. That's the 1 hour. And I haven't looked at all at chat because I've just been looking at code. Has anyone said anything?
I'm kind of keeping up with them. They're keeping each other company, answering each other's questions, which is always fantastic to see. Like, as a community manager, of course, we're here to connect with you and connect you with other people, with our guests, etc. But seeing you guys help each other problem solve and interact with each other is super rewarding.
Absolutely. Anything funny? Anyone say anything funny? I love the jokes.
Oh, plenty of funny. They were talking about how they asked how we got Satan to teach us because of the light mode in your script.
Pronounced Satine.
Of course. I said that our scheduling was tight, but we managed to work it in, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice.
The other thing I want to call out
things heating up with the editor color scheme fandom.
People feel really strongly about it. I'd like to know. Chat, let me know. Do you use light mode or dark mode when you do your own coding? Mike, just to keep you in the loop, we do have 30 minutes left on the clock-ish. Okay. And I know we still got to get through a day. Do you want to show off what this looks like? And then we can dive into the day. Great.
So I'm just going to hop right into the, you'll see here in a second. I'm going to show you the cosmetic version.
Got it.
Time flies when we're just talking about fun stuff.
So
cosmetic version here, didn't do a whole lot of tweaks to this, though I did add a foot FX position so that I could do effects at the feet of the character. That's just an empty game object that I have on here, foot FX. And then I have some prefabs for my double jump FX and some jump dust. Again, purely cosmetics. And let me show you the character controller I have in here. So character controller is a little bit different now. So we've got any state can go to jump. So you can be jumping regardless of what you're doing. Jump then transitions to land. A very brief 1 or 2 frame landing animation when you hit the ground. And from land, you then either go to idle or run, depending on if you're moving or not. So whether you're idle or run, you hit the button, you go to jump, jump goes to land, and land back to idle and run. And now we have speed, jump. Are we currently grounded? Because we don't leave the jump state until we hit the ground, so we'll just hold it forever. And then we have a vertical speed, which I don't actually think we're using this iteration around. And in the code, let me just show you again, cosmetic stuff. What are we doing? We just have some new animation callouts. We got these, the position of your foot and these the prefabs. We set the vertical speed inside there. We set the is grounded into the animator. And then again, speed, there we go. And then when we jump, we instantiate jump dust, which we then destroy after half a second. Terrible way to do this. Object pool. Don't create and destroy FX like that. Not a good thing to do. And then, if we double jump, we have a double jump sort of effect. Again, we just generate it and then we destroy it. Again, not a good practice, but whatever. And so I will press play here. I almost did light mode for the editor just because it's easier for some people. But there's my nice green color, red when I'm in the air. You can see the little VFX on the ground, and then VFX when I double jump. VFX really make it feel like it's better than it is. Mm-hmm. I no longer stick to the walls. Exactly. You feel snappy, but it's just purely cosmetics. Still can't get up there. I still don't have variable height on my jumps, which kind of sucks. I was hoping to have that in there for this iteration, but I'm double jumping. And I run up the slope slowly with the slide, and then I slide down automatically, which is pretty cool. I no longer pop off of it when I'm running up and stuff. There's actually a bug in here. I'll see if I can get it to trigger that we solve in the next iteration. Every once in a while, you'll land, and he'll just be able to run full speed up this slope because we're not actually zeroing out the velocity of moving up and down. I can't get it to trigger this time, but whatever. We'll see the solution to that later.
Awesome.
That is 1 hour. There
Crushed
we go.
it.
Very,
very good.
Working
and
on
again,
it. And
after this one, you kind of came in and you were like, you had your goals, you had your execution. Did you feel like accomplished everything you want, felt really good about it, or
yeah, I feel pretty good about it. I just nixed crouching mostly because I was like, I justified it by being like, you don't crouch in 9 souls, so obviously we don't need crouching. But yeah, the reality is I just ran out of time. So a couple of things that I did just through playing this, decided that I wanted to do for the one day. So for the one day, I knew that I wanted to limit my falling speed. I found that if I fell from high enough, I would fall faster and faster and faster and faster, which 1, doesn't feel very good, and 2, potentially cause you to clip into the environment and stuff like that if you fall from a big enough height. So I wanted to limit how quickly I fall. I wanted to add sprinting. I wanted to add a dash. And I wanted to finally get that variable jump height that I thought I was going to have from the very first iteration, the 10-minute iteration. I wanted to do an edge grab. Like when I jump, I grab onto the edge of a corner, then enable myself to jump up and over. I thought about doing a wall grab and like a wall climb and stuff, but I just didn't have the time for it. Didn't get that one in there. Like I said, I had a goal of doing crouch and crouch movement, but I didn't make that work. I wanted to air dash as a stretch goal. I wanted to get dash working and hopefully air dash. And then there's this last thing I wanted in here that a lot of people don't know about. It's called coyote time. So you know Wile E. Coyote, when Wile E. Coyote like walks into the air and until he looks down, he's just walking, and then he looks down and he falls. So coyote time in a 2D game, probably in a 3D game as well, is that forgiveness period where you're no longer on the ground, but you can still jump. And we add that because if you don't have it, the players feel punished. They feel like I hit jump. What the hell? Your game sucks, when really they missed it. So it's just that little bit of forgiveness, that like they jump just a tiny bit too late. And we're like, cool, you're still within the window. We're good. Right. And that's called coyote time. So if I look here, I've got same capsule collider, same foot collider here, same rigid body. And if I look down here, so one, I have this draw debug raycast. Just there's no more like non-cosmetic and cosmetic. I just merged everything on this one.
Okay, cool.
Because again, it just didn't feel right anyway without the cosmetics at this point. So I just made it all one thing. I kind of organized my variables a bit. So everything that was like, I have a run speed and a sprint speed. I have my jump force. I have my double jump force. I have the force I add if I continue to hold the jump button. I have how long I can hold my jump button. And these were all just sort of tweaked through play testing. My coyote duration is only 0.05 seconds, but it's enough, right? To really feel the difference. I clamp my falling speed to 20 meters per second, basically. I don't disable the jump collider, but I disable the checking for ground. And that's how we solve that is we're not turning off the collider. We're just going to stop checking to see if we're on the ground, 4.1 seconds after we jump. That way we're not messing with the physics system and we're good. Then if I'm hanging on the wall, what's the force that I jump off of the wall with?
Oh, okay.
Right? A little bit different than a regular jump and double jump. If I'm on the wall and I want to leave the wall, I need to be able to jump off of it. So what's that force? What's the height of my eye as I'm looking to grab a ledge? How far out do I reach? That's my reach offset. The reach offset is how much you pull in. The grab distance is how far out I can grab. The player height in terms of grabbing onto a wall, like how high do I need to be when hanging on this wall? And then the edge grab offset is how I kind of shimmy around my collider a little bit to make sure that I'm really up against the wall once I've grabbed on. All of these things required just to make sure that I can grab a wall. Again, I am certain there are better ways to do this, but this was like this makes sense to me. 3 ray cast, fine. We'll do it this way.
I have a question for you, Mike.
Sure.
With so many of these things that we've kind of touched on, and it makes a ton of sense that like it's just to feel like what feels right when you're playing. Is there like a guiding light in trying to establish that right feel, or is it literally just trial and error, getting in and testing and tweaking?
No, so that's what I was talking about. Like if I knew the game's mechanics, if I knew what the level looked like, if I knew the design philosophies, then I would be able to tweak these in a much more meaningful way. Since I didn't have any of that, I literally just like, okay, cool, that's interesting, right? But the settings that I have here, even the way that I'm doing things, works in this little playground that I just threw here just because. But like this game, maybe the game has significantly more edges, and so I need to pop off the walls more cleanly, and I need to do this, I need to do that. That's all questions of game mechanics. So your guiding light for tweaking these values is what's the game, and what are the puzzles? What's the combat? Even how far do you and fast do you dash? And all these things are just depends, right? So there's no right or wrong. I just wanted to give myself as many options because again, a prototype is all about options. You throw in all as many bells and whistles as you can because you want people to be able to tweak it. So I just wanted to have as many options as possible that if some hypothetical person came in and was like, all right, now here's the game level, I'm like, cool, now we can really make this work. Because even if the question of like, how high do you jump? I don't know. Like as high as I want, right? Like, I don't know. So then I added a variable for the ground collider. I'm no longer getting the ground collider off of slide movement. It's the same ground filter, but what I've done is I've changed my normal angles to actually be 25 and 155, because what I was noticing is when I grab the edge of a wall and I jump, just as I was cresting over the corner for a brief second, I'm like, oh, I'm on the ground, and my character would be like, you're on the ground again for just a moment, and then finish cresting over the wall, and it was like very glitchy. And I was like, oh, because I'm detecting angles the angle was like 5 or 10 degrees of just during that jump. And I was like, that's not right. So let me make that window a little bit more forgiving or less forgiving, I guess, so that I wouldn't detect those collisions. And I will show you a quick little tidbit here that really helped me figure that out. Besides the fact that Melvin really helped me figure this out. Melvin May, by the way, Unity engineer, awesome, really answered a ton of my questions as I was putting this together. Well, one of the things he showed me here is I didn't know about this. If you go into your project settings under Physics 2D, under Gizmos, you can actually turn on, where's that window? It's appearing on my other monitor, whatever. I'm going to turn on contacts, and now it's showing me the normals of the contacts of these two colliders, the ground collider and my foot collider. And it's saying, hey, these are the areas we're detecting it's colliding. And if I go on a slope, you'll see that the angle of that changes, which actually makes it really cool to be able to be like, oh, I can see it's detecting this other collision that I didn't even notice because it's going to draw a nice magenta arrow over it to make it very obvious. So that's just a little tidbit there.
Yeah.
I turned that on. I was like, oh, that's super cool. I didn't even know about that. And so those are all the different variable changes. Ground filter is the same, except for those angle differences. Slide movement. I actually do still have the collider in here, but I'm not actually using it for that stuff. And then, yeah, still doing the same movement with that. And then I have a bunch of flags that I've made public so I could just like look to see what was going on. Am I on the ground? Is this the first time I'm jumping? Not a double jump, but the first jump. Have I double jumped? Have I just began my jump? Have I just wall jumped? Right? Can I dash? Am I currently dashing? Am I hanging? And then just some different VFX and some trail particles and stuff like that. So I'm going to play it here, show you this movement, and then we'll look at the code real quick.
Cool.
Yeah. A lot of variables to just be like, what's happening right now? So now I've changed it up. So I'm white when I'm on the ground. I'm red when I'm on the air. Still got my double jump. Now I'm green when I dash.
Oh, cool.
Right. So there's your dash.
Strong
but if I
dash.
hold, I like it. If I hold dash, I sprint. Right. Wait. There we go. And it's a different animation even. Like I said, this animation pack or this pixel or sprite pack has been great. There's animations for everything. But the cool thing is that like, okay, I can just dash straight over gaps, right? Which is very fun. I jump in the air, I can air dash, and I've got some different VFX for that. Oh, I kind of spoiled it there, but got my wall hang, right? So there we go, hanging on the wall like that. And when I jump, I used to just jump straight vertically, but now I kind of bounce off the wall a little bit, but I'm realizing that I set it up to always go one direction to the right instead of paying attention to which way I'm facing. So that's a bug in my code, but that's what you get when you run out of time. But that way it pops me off like how I want. So you see it kind of pops up at an angle, and I actually disable the ability to move horizontally for like a fraction of a second right after I wall jump. That way I can't like just clip right back into the wall. It pushes me away a little bit, and you can really see how that works. Like here, where you can climb up and then do all that stuff. And then you can dash up the slopes and sprint and whatnot.
This is great.
Yeah, turned out pretty good. Still didn't crouch, so I'm never able to do that part of it. But crouching is the great white whale for me. Knowing we're tight on time, I'll just pop into the code here real quick. So a lot more of it, right? So we've got all the variable declarations and stuff like that. I think that maybe the more interesting thing to point out is how I do the wall jump checks. And this took me a little while to suss out. If I look, I have 3 raycasts that I'm just drawing them. So I have this draw debug, or debug.draw ray or something like that. I forget the method there. But basically saying, all right, I have to do 3 checks. Like is the top raycast clear? It doesn't hit anything. But the bottom raycast does hit something. And then that one that's going down hits something this way. That's the only way it means I've got an edge, right? If they're both hitting something, I have a wall, right? If neither of them hitting something, I'm just in the air. If one hits the wall and the other one doesn't hit a wall, but my downward doesn't hit one, then I'm still too high up, right? And I haven't actually come down to where the edge is yet. So it took a while to be like, these 3 raycasts get me the thing that I want. But there we go. So that's, again, they're probably like, someone's probably just like, why didn't you just do this? And I'm, probably, but that's what made sense to me, working really fast. So in here, basically, inside fixed update, I now have a method where I'm just doing all my physics checks in one place. Then I'm processing my horizontal movement, I'm processing my jump. And then I'm doing some animation stuff. So with my physics check, I'm like, was I on the ground before? Or basically last frame, was I on the ground? And that becomes important in a moment here. If I just began a jump, then, or if I have not just began a jump, then I'm going to see, am I on the ground? But obviously, if I did just begin a jump, I'm not checking the ground because that's just going to keep me anchored to the ground. I have to give time to get away from the ground collider. If I am colliding, or if I am on the ground, then I have my double jump. I'm not doing a first jump right now. My coyote time is extended. And if I was on the ground, let's clear out my linear velocity in the Y, because of the way I'm doing this, because again, I'm doing this many ways, there could be some leftover Y velocities that make things act a little screwy. And that's not good. Actually, you know what? Just for the purposes of this, I know time is of the essence, but I really feel like showing you this because if you see this in your own games, I want you to see or understand why. So if I just turn that off real quick here, and I'll actually expand the info of my rigid body. There we go. And so you can see, like right now, it's telling me that I have -2 whatever velocity. You can see my velocity is changing there. But there are times where, so that's how I should move up the slope. Come on, break. There we go. You see how I'm moving fast now. Why am I moving fast? Right? And I'm noticing I have like 7.5 units here of linear velocity that has not been cleared out because the way I'm handling slide or velocity directly or force, they're conflicting with each other. And actually, when I go to run the other way, you'll see he just pops up. Why did he jump? Well, he jumped because he still had remaining, it still had remaining velocity. And even now, it's got -12 units of downward velocity that never got cleared out. So because of the mixed way that I'm doing this, I have to clear out that velocity if I remain on the ground more than a frame.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if you see that in your project, the takeaway there too is also just expand your rigid body under info, and you'll be able to see your physics, your velocities, your angular velocities, your inertias, your centers, all of these different things, the context, what's everything it's touching, all that stuff. That'll help you know what's going on there. For the wall grab, basically, I use this method called Raycast Helper that I wrote, where it just simplifies the method of calling physics2d.raycast. It's down here where I pass in the offset, the direction, the length, and it just returns, well, back another version of this that figures out where I currently am. So where the rays need to go. Am I drawing the debug for that? What's the color of it? And so on and so forth. So that's just a helper method that makes it so I have to pass in less variables each time I want to do this. And so I'm just doing these for the head check here. There's a much longer explanation of this particular method. I kind of cheated and stole this a little bit because I wrote this before, back in 2018, when we did a 2D character or 2D platformer based off of Robbie Swifthand and the Orb of Mysteries. And so which is a great game, by the way. If you haven't played it, check it out. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, how am I going to do wall grabbing then? And so I just went yoink, and I grabbed that code here to basically just do the checks. So if you want a longer explanation of why all this works and what all this code means, definitely check that out. It's still on YouTube. But here's the code to basically hey, we have a ledge grab, right? Because if the player's off the ground and is not hanging and is falling and found a ledge and found a wall and is not blocked,
wow,
we have a ledge grab. And then, we kind of move the player, we nudge a couple of things, we make our rigid body static, right? So because we're just basically stuck to the wall, and we are hanging, and we have our double jump, and the animation we set is hanging to true. Horizontal movement, we're processing our dash. By the way, I didn't steal. I stole. I borrowed. I used a YouTube video for this one, actually. It was pretty good. We have the link for that if anyone's curious. But I was like, I could figure out dash here real quick or YouTube. And I saw this thing and I was like, cool. It took me like 5 minutes and I had dashing and it was pretty awesome. There's that link. So I'm not saying that's the right way. I'm not saying that's the best way. I'm saying that's the video I found and it worked for me. So cool. YouTube. I just find them videos. And basically in my processing movement, horizontal movement, if I'm dashing or I'm hanging or I just wall jumped, then I'm not processing any horizontal movement because I can't. Otherwise, then, if I'm holding dash, then I'm moving at my sprint speed, otherwise my regular speed. And then we do the, if I'm grounded, this is all kind of the same as we saw before. I did print out some velocity there just to be able to check what's going on. This is all again the same as before. Nothing's really different here. There's my flip direction, setting up some animation. Enable move basically is just right after I've just finished wall jumping. I kind of invoke that one out after a period of time. In jump, if I'm dashing, I don't do anything here. If I'm hanging, I need to say, hey, am I crouching? So just let go of the wall, fall straight down. So is hanging as false. I set the anim for that to false, and then I just say, hey, you're dynamic again, and that's all I do. If I jump while I'm on the wall, then again, I do all the stuff there. I add the jumping force, and then I invoke enable move after 0.1 seconds, which is a magic number. I really should have a variable for that, but again, I was moving quickly. Basically, in 0.1 seconds, I'll be able to do horizontal movement again. And then the variable height, this is an initial jump, right? So I've pressed jump, and this isn't my first jumping, and either I'm grounded or I have coyote time, then I'm no longer on the ground. This is my first jump. Jump time is basically the current time plus the hold duration. So that's how long I'm able to hold the jump key if I want to do that. I add my initial force. I just began my jump as true. I'm canceling any invokes to enable the collider and re-enable the collider, which in this case is just turning off my ability to check the ground, but I'm not actually turning on and off the collider. And then I'm doing some VFX. Otherwise, if I'm holding the jump button, now is when we start adding the incremental jump force of continuing to hold the button. That's what makes it a small jump for a light hit or a bigger jump for a longer hold. Again, it's only like 0.12 seconds. It's not a lot, but it makes a difference. And so we're just going to keep doing that until we run out of jump time. And then we're no longer able to hold from there. If I've let go of the button while I was in an initial jump, right, then this is no longer my initial jump where I can hold the button anymore. I can't let go and then press it again and still be in that initial growth phase. And then finally, if all of these things aren't true, now we're checking for the double jump. Have I pressed jump and I have a double jump available? That one's simple, just pop up in the air. There we go. And dash, I'm not going to go through the code here. That's in the video we just linked. Or if you're just watching it on demand, there you go. That's the code. But definitely check out that video about dashing. Just Google search Unity 2D dash. It's like the first thing that popped up. Yep. But basically, we're just using a coroutine, which is weird because I'm doing invokes here, but coroutines here. The whole thing feels icky to me because you got to find like one way, but prototyping, just sort of throw whatever you can at it. And this is what makes us dash forward with the trail effects and stuff like that. Setting the color, now we've got cyan if we're hanging, green if we're dashing, red if we're not on the ground, and white if we're on the ground, and then these helper methods. That's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff you accomplished in a day. For context, did you use like a work day, like 8 to 9 hours, or did you use like a day, like 24 hours to do this?
I gave myself 6 hours.
Okay.
And I had to break it up because I just kept having like phone calls and meetings, stuff like that. Finding 6 continuous hours was nearly impossible.
Yeah.
So I think I did like 2, 3, and 2 or whatever. That doesn't add up. But you know what I mean. But I made it work. But I didn't give myself like, you would think like 8 hours, but I like to believe that we're not machines. And I've never once had a full solid 8 hours of productivity in my entire life. So I was like 6 hours feels like a real work day. So that's what I did. So not 24 hours, but just like 6 hour work day. The other thing I want to point out here is the animator. So again, a bit of a change here, but kind of cool. There we go. That's right. So ground, so that we no longer have the idle or run states, we have ground. And ground is now a blend tree that blends between idle, run, and sprint, depending on how fast we're going. So based on our speed, and if we can see that over there, we're either, idling, running, or sprinting. And we're playing those animations that we blend between. It's not as good as a 3D animation blend because 3D animations are using like, points in space and stuff like that. These are just flat images, but still works. So ground is actually any of these 3 states. Same with jumping. Jumping is now called airborne because there's no real difference between a jump and a fall. A jump is just a fall that you meant to do. So here we're blending between basically our initial jump and then our capping out at the top and then our falling based on the velocity, right? So, and I duplicated jump mid just so you can see. So I wanted to have a longer mid time. So that's why I've got mid in there twice. So jump, kind of hang, and then fall. And the nice thing about that is that even if I don't jump, if I just run off the edge, I still play the jumping animation, the airborne state. It's just the falling portion, right? Based on what my velocity is in the downward direction. So there's that. Land is just a brief, like I've just hit the ground. So for a moment, I play that one frame of like I've hit the ground and now we're back to the grounded state. And for dashing, I've got both. So from any state I could dash start, then the dash loop, because I don't know how long dash is going to last. And then when the loop of dash ends, like I've done dashing, I go to the one frame of dash end, which goes right back into my airborne state, which goes right back into my ground state. And then ledge hang comes off the airborne state because I'm on the ledge. So
that's great.
Blend trees make that stuff really, really cool. Yeah. Someone said, wait, how are we handling slopes? That's the rigid body 2D.slide method, which makes slopes significantly easier. Where in the past, you'd have to do like all the raycasting yourself and all the math to keep yourself on the slope and everything. Yeah. So there we go. And I feel like that was a speed run.
Speed run.
Yeah.
You did
definitely
it.
shouldn't have wasted as much time at the beginning.
Well, we were chatting. What we'll do for next time. This is the first one. You know what I mean? We'll go. It's iterative. We'll make it better for next time. We know we want to chat. I don't want to take away the chat. We're hanging out with you guys, the Unity community as well. Like we're not going to reduce that. We'll just make sure that we expect to do the stream longer. Not only did you speedrun creating these pieces, you speedran explaining them all. So a massive thank you to Mike, everybody. Make some noise in chat for Mike coming in and doing the first of this crunch time / clocked and loaded.
Yeah. So we have some links to share though. And again, shout out to Melvin May, developer. He's the guy that made that rigid body 2D.slide method. And his one ask to everyone was to try it out and give us feedback. This feature kind of came in under the radar and a lot of people don't know about it. So we got some links there. So we have Melvin's own YouTube channel as linked here. He puts a bunch of videos up on there. We've got the discussions forum area for the 2D physics stuff. And then there is a sample library for 2D physics. And there's an ebook. And the link I gave you before was the wrong link. So I'm just going to grab this. I think I did put it in chat, but I'm just going to drop it. Oh, you got it. You got it.
Yeah, I threw it in there.
Well, I'm putting it in there too.
Okay.
So we can both.
So now everyone knows.
That. Now everyone knows that ebook is cool.
No excuses.
This is saying in my family, we have reasons, but not excuses. You might have a reason, but that doesn't change the outcome. So anyway, hashtag deep. So please try it out. Please play around with rigidbody.slide. Check out the sample library. Come back with feedback. And it was fun actually through having this conversation with Melvin. We were like, oh, we should have an example for this. We should have an example for that. So we're going to add a bunch of new examples to that library and stuff like that. So definitely check it out. More folks asking if they're going to get the project files, and I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, I can't share the art assets because that's a paid asset from the asset store. But in terms of the code, it's not good code. You can just watch the video and see how I did it.
Do as you're told, not as we do in this kind of moment.
Yeah.
I feel like
maybe we should come back and be like, this is the right way to do things.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we do when we know that we're shooting for longer for the next time, which I think is, again, a great idea. So we will also, as always, link you guys to the discussions, the general discussions page, and the Discord, where you can go and connect with your fellow community members, as well as ask for technical help and hopefully get some responses from the community. I'll let you know about our next stream as well, happening next Tuesday. We will be bringing on the developer of Citizen Sleeper 2, which will be very, very fun. A solo-made game with only visual scripting, no, I suppose, traditional code. That will be part of the conversation, is what counts as coding. But we'll also be talking about their narrative approach, how they came together to create this, and what they wanted to accomplish with a sequel to an indie darling. So come and check that out, February 25th, 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's 5 p.m. GMT. Come and learn a lot from one of the people who have just absolutely crushed it in creating their own games. I want to say a massive thank you to Mike for being here one more time. Mike, I love this. This was super fun. We should find a way to do it again.
I liked it. I enjoyed it, but man.
Stressful for you. But we'll find another opportunity to do something similar to this with the newly renamed Clocked and Loaded. A big thank you to C-Stron for the name and participation. And a massive shout out to everybody who watched this live. That's the best way to consume this. I hope that you feel a little smarter, a little more inspired, and definitely a lot more connected to the Unity community. until we see you all again next Tuesday. My name is Jackson. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.